It's Luisa Bernal. I'm with the UNDP Finance Sector Hub, and I'm joining you from Geneva. The webinar today focuses on the impact of COVID pandemic on the micro, small, medium enterprises. We know that the private sector have, of course, been significantly affected by the pandemic, but the private sector is quite heterogeneous. So it encompasses from large corporations and enterprises to smaller firms and even the self-employed. And the way that they have been affected has been different. The smaller firms and those that are working in the informal sector are generally less resources to respond, whether technological, financial, or human, to be able to respond to shocks such as the COVID containment measures. At the same time, small firms are able sometimes to be quite agile and respond in ways and adapt in ways that the larger firms may not always be able to. To the extent that the micro and SMEs in the informal and formal sector represent a large share of employment worldwide, as many as 90% in low-income economies, the impact of COVID and how these firms will be able or not to weather the crisis will be critical for the future in terms of poverty, inequality, and more broadly, the realization of the SDGs. We know that UNDP country offices, you are all at the front line, working with partners to design and implement programs that respond to the needs of these enterprises and build resilience for the future. So the webinar today is really using the lens of the micro and SMEs to understand what has been overall the impact of the pandemic in this sector, looking at how entrepreneurs are being able to adapt, and we have an entrepreneur himself sharing the experience of adapting to this major crisis. And then we want to hear from UNDP country offices that will share their experience and the programs that they have put in place to respond precisely to the needs of these enterprises. So we have a great group of speakers ready to share their thoughts and experience with you. And without further ado, I will give the floor to Luciana, who is the manager, program manager of the Business Call to Action in UNDP, to moderate the first session. Luciana, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Luisa, for the introduction. Welcome, everyone. I'll be moderating the first section of this webinar. We will have a thorough discussion regarding the impact of COVID-19 on enterprises and how MSMEs have adapted their strategies to cope with the current crisis. So the panel will showcase two interesting initiatives. The first one is from the International Trade Center. They will present a global survey on the impact of the COVID-19 on MSMEs. They present the highlights of these interesting studies that covers enterprises in developed and developing countries with regional specific features. Following this presentation, we have Sevamob, a BCtA member company that has replicated its business model in 15 countries, supporting local governments and foundations to respond to the pandemic. So we encourage you to send your questions in the Q&A box in the chat, and we'll be pleased to address them at the end of this session. So we'll have a small time for Q&A, and we'll be glad to incorporate your questions into the panel. If you need support for understanding how you can better align and provide tools and services for the SMEs and how they can cope with the COVID-19 crisis, and particularly to keep their business afloat, then you definitely benefit from our distinguished panelists invited for this webinar today. I'd like to welcome our panelists, Ms. Barbara Ramos, Chief of Research and Strategies for Export Section at the International Trade Center, Ms. Valentina Rollo, Project Manager of SME Competitiveness Survey, and Mr. Shelley Saxena, Founder and CEO of Sevamob. I'm pleased to invite Barbara Ramos and Valentina Rollo to present the ITC COVID-19 Business Impact Survey, Enhancing Policy Through Data Collection. Over to you.
Well, thank you, Luciana, and thank you, Luisa, for the kind invitation for us to join this webinar today. I'm going to be very brief, as my colleague Valentina will be the one presenting the results of our survey, but I just want to give a little bit of a background on ITC and the work that we're doing for those of you who might not be entirely familiar with what we do. The International Trade Center based here in Geneva is a joint UN-WTO organization that is the only UN agency entirely dedicated to fostering the competitiveness of micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises. And as Luisa alluded to in her opening remarks, this is critical to growth in any economy, as MSMEs represent over 90% of companies in many countries and tend to employ about 70% or more of the labor force in many countries around the world. So they're critical not just for growth, but they're critical for inclusive growth. And as we will see from Valentina's remarks, they were hit pretty hard during COVID. So here at ITC, we have a long history, a long tradition of looking at SME competitiveness data to try and provide the best support that we can to governments that are trying to implement policies in support of SME competitiveness and to our SME partners and beneficiaries. So here at ITC, we very early on realized that there is very little data on SME competitiveness, very little. And that makes it very hard for anyone to put in place targeted policies or programs because we just don't know their weaknesses and we don't know their strengths that we can leverage. So the ITC a few years ago in 2015 started deploying the SME competitiveness survey with the exact objective of collecting information on the drivers of SME competitiveness so we can provide targeted support and targeted advice. To date, we have analyzed 18,000 companies and counting in about 46 countries. And we not only leverage the opportunity to work with our partners to get general information on SME competitiveness, but we also tailor specific modules of the SME competitiveness survey to specific crises. For instance, the COVID-19. And that's what you're going to see on the next slide. At ITC, when the crisis hit, what happened is we were able to leverage the partnerships that we had to implement the general SME competitiveness survey to collect data on about 6,000 companies in about 136 countries around the world. So we leveraged our partnerships, we leveraged our channels in the country to be able to reach SMEs in the heat of the crisis and try and understand how COVID-19 and the restrictions imposed by governments to safeguard human health were impacting them. And this is what you're going to hear from Valentina today. If you would like to go more in depth into any of the findings of this report, you can see them on our flagship publication, the SME Competitiveness Outlook, which was released earlier this year. And I will come back at the end of the presentation to talk a little bit more about what we intend to do with the data that we collected and how going forward, we're going to do new publications looking at competitiveness and resilience. Now I'll give the floor to my colleague, Valentina.
Thank you, Barbara, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all the people that are connected. Yes, as Barbara was saying, I will present the findings, well, some findings, selected findings from our survey. So yes, the results are already published on the SME Competitiveness Outlook, as Barbara mentioned, but be assured that this presentation has been specifically customized to you. So you will not actually find the figures that you will see today in any publication at the moment. So let's start from the more general finding, really. How have companies been affected? And for you, we have reproduced the shares. So we have disaggregated the results by the regions that might be more interesting to you. So overall, in the first bar and overall, you know, in all the bars, the gray bars, you will see the average share of companies that reported being strongly affected by the crisis. So what you see is that 55% of respondents overall globally felt strongly affected, but the highest hit continent is Sub-Saharan Africa with the Middle East and North Africa. This overall for the region. But what is more interesting is to see that overall SMEs are more affected by large companies. This is not going to surprise you. We know that SMEs are more vulnerable, and this simply confirms this. What is interesting, though, is the fact that even if Sub-Saharan Africa and Middle East and North Africa are the regions with the highest share of affected companies, the biggest gap between SMEs, MSMEs, and large companies is in Latin America and the Caribbean, where you see a big gap. So 70 almost percent of SMEs felt strongly affected, again against the 29% of large firms, a big difference. And I know that you will probably wonder if small firms are a proxy in a way for informal firms. So we cannot say that all these small firms are informal firms. We know that the majority of small firms and micro firms are informal, and we know how important informal activities are for emerging and developing economies, and that's why we can show the result by some specific characteristics of companies, like their informality, the register status. So companies that were not officially registered, so informal firms, were definitely more affected when we asked them than formal firms. And the same apply to women-led firms and to youth-led firms. So some types of firms clearly suffered more during the crisis. If we go to the next, so we asked how long companies could survive under lockdown. And here again, a disaggregation of results by region. So the outlook was bleak when we asked, and now we know that 1/5 of companies overall, so 20% of companies overall, you see here in total, in the global average, were at risk of closing within 3 months. And here again, SMEs more affected than large companies. And the difference is not small. You see that 9% of large firms were affected against 22% for MSMEs. So double effect, really double difference. The difference is not double for all the regions. What we see is that Middle East and North Africa is definitely the region with the highest share. So 30% of companies approximately were at risk of closing within 3 months. But again, the biggest gap is not necessarily in the most affected region. The biggest gap you see again in Latin America and the Caribbean, but also Sub-Saharan Africa. So the SMEs are clearly struggling more and at risk of closing and bankruptcy in all the regions, but the effects change, the differences change across regions, really. And here again, what you would expect, again, the informal companies are definitely more affected, so they were more at risk of closing down within a short term. Against formal firms. Here we don't see a huge difference between women or man-led firms, but again we see that youth-led firms are at risk, more at risk compared to non-youth firms. But, so yes, a bleak outlook, but firms tried to cope with the crisis as best as they could. And we asked them which strategies they were adopting to cope with the crisis. So the most common coping strategies across all regions were really reducing unemployment and start teleworking. So you see orange almost everywhere in our regions, temporary reducing employment and teleworking in purple. But of all the list of coping strategies that we listed in our survey, there were 4 choices that we can consider more positive, proactive, if you want, more agile in a certain sense. And these are those that you can see here. So I read it for you in case you cannot read well. Increasing marketing efforts, selling online, customizing products or even selling new products, or started sourcing from new suppliers, actually when the supply chain got disrupted due to the closure of customs. So we gave them these 4 options among the others in the list. And of course, these are the most difficult if you want to implement. But there are interesting results by regions, I think. So one, for example, that comes out of the box is really South Asia, where 40% of the respondents manage actually to increase marketing efforts. So it's already something. And Sub-Saharan Africa is the region where 30% of companies managed to sell their products online. And on the other side, you can see there are some regions like, orange, this orange spot is for East Asia and Pacific, and the Middle East and North Africa are the regions with the lowest share of companies choosing any actually of those of these options, so this mechanism to cope with the crisis. So you have better examples and less positive examples, but still a comparison that definitely will need and will require more analysis to interpret and to answer actually the why is it, what is the situation, how can we explain these results. We also asked the question about access to information. Why? Because actually at the beginning of the crisis, the first countries like China, like Italy, showed how important it is to access information about government's benefits and actually information during really the first days and weeks after the shock. And it's not very positive to see here that half of the sample, of the global sample, felt that access to information and benefits from governments was difficult or very difficult. And here again, SMEs, so the light blue spot, much more affected in access to information as compared to large firms, 38%. With all the regions, of course, with differences across all the regions, and South Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa showing as the regions where access to information was most difficult. But again, once again, actually, the Latin America and the Caribbean, once again, is the region with the biggest gap between SMEs and large companies. So from this presentation, I think there are some clear and key takeaways. So there is no doubt that unfortunately COVID-19 has affected businesses worldwide across all the regions. You see an important effect, but SMEs and informal firms have been disproportionately affected. The Sub-Saharan Africa is the region where companies felt most affected with the highest share, and the Middle East and North Africa region is the one where the share of SMEs, so small firms at least of closure within 3 months, is the highest. But consistently across all the results, the region where the gap between small and large firms is always biggest in the Latin American and Caribbean region. So that's one of the key takeaways that can be discussed, and would be interesting to actually study afterwards to understand why these differences, and why some regions consistently come out in a specific way. And while the outlook was not positive, while the outlook was quite bleak, actually, firms did try to cope as best as they could. And the most used coping strategies were to reduce employment and start teleworking. But there are some specific and interesting cases, like, for example, South Asia, where 40% of companies increase marketing efforts. So that's already something positive. And I leave now again the floor to Barbara, so that at least she can provide a forward-looking view of our work. Thank you, and I leave it to Barbara.
Thank you, Valentina. So just to conclude, you just heard from our research on the effects of COVID-19. But here at ITC, we would like to go beyond just understanding the impacts of COVID on MSMEs. We would like to actually put together the two data sets that we have on COVID and on the general SME competitiveness survey to try and identify what are the underlying competitiveness characteristics that led some companies to be more resilient than others during this crisis. And this with the goal to not only help companies recover from the current crisis, but also prepare them for a potential next shock. So the flagship report that we prepare every year, the SME Competitiveness Outlook of 2021, will actually show the results of this particular research on the links between competitiveness and resilience. And we'll also give a little bit more of an in-depth and focused look on resilience to the climate crisis. So we look forward to coming back and potentially discussing the results of this upcoming work with the colleagues in the field. And I would close this presentation with actually a call for action. This kind of research requires data collection that relies heavily on our ability to partner with organizations with a strong field presence, because ITC's field presence is rather limited. So we would welcome the opportunity to discuss with any of you here today that are based in the field and that would like to partner with us to scale our data collection and to try and provide more targeted information and findings on the countries and regions where you work, so we can actually collaborate and try to find more targeted support to MSMEs across the globe. So thank you for the opportunity again, Luisa, and I give the floor to Luciana again.
Luciana, you're muted.
Yes, I'm sorry. So let's move forward through this interesting study presented by ITC. COVID-19 has affected business worldwide with special impacts on sub-Saharan Africa and Latin America. However, in business call to action, we've seen that companies serving low-income markets through tech-enabled solutions in the health sector were able to reach the last mile and those who are being left behind, responding timely to the challenges that the pandemic has brought and supporting the local population. So now I'll pass over to Mr. Sh to present experience in the healthcare services in low income. Over to you, Shelley.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
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 Inviting me to present today. I'm looking forward to having a quick discussion with you guys. We are a US-based company, and we provide an AI-enabled primary healthcare platform to organizations. We are doing this in 15 plus states of India and one state of the US. And we have also done pilots in Southern Africa. So our platform has three components. One is AI-based triage and point of care screening for blood, vision, urine, diet, and sputum. Second is telehealth, and third is on-site pop-up clinics. And by integrating these three, we enable delivery of primary care at substantially lower cost. So currently our impact includes 20,000 patient consults per month, up to 50% reduction in cost of primary care, up to 15% reduction in malnutrition in select groups, up to 25% reduction in vision issues in select groups, and early detection and treatment of life-threatening diseases. So these include infectious diseases, including COVID. They include everyday diarrhea, cholera, malaria, and so on, and other hygiene and water-related diseases. So for COVID, the couple of pivots which we made. So first, we added a product called Sevamar Protector, which protects frontline health workers and reduces the need for PPEs by up to 90%. This is fully portable and can be set up anywhere in minutes. The second thing was we added a whole bunch of on-site COVID-related services, which include maintaining temperature log, doing screening, both based upon clinical history as well as temperature screens, rapid antigen testing. We also did rapid antibody testing. And then I'll mention a gap, which is a challenge which we are currently facing shortly. Along with this, we facilitate telehealth consultations with back office, and we track the patients and clusters in our patient data management system. And then in terms of online and remote services, there are full-fledged video consults and second opinion capability, and patient data management which can work fully offline in low resource settings, which we use ourselves and also provide to other partners. So some examples of our COVID-19 work we received since April. COVID has been pretty nice to us. We received 20 new contracts, at least more than 20 new contracts in that time frame. These include, I'll give you some examples, highlight the ones where the government partnership was involved. So for example, there's a PPP partnership in Rajasthan and Madhya Pradesh, where we are the last mile awareness generation and a screening provider. And then we refer the patients to in-network facilities of the government for further care. And in this case, the funder is Fullerton, which is a microfinance company. And the areas in which we offer this are those which are of interest to Fullerton. So we are doing this in 2 states, Rajasthan and Madhya Pradesh. And now we are expanding that partnership to Maharashtra in several areas and Uttar Pradesh also. Then another example of the partnership is there are several public sector utilities like Nuclear Power Corporation of India, National Highway Authority of India, Indian Oil, Bharat Petroleum, Hindustan Petroleum, Airport Authority of India. All these are examples where for those customers, they asked us to deploy an on-site employee health clinic for especially with COVID services as part of that. So there were 4 or 5 examples of such contracts from these customers, which are highlighted here. Then there are another set of partners which are using us for CSR activities in the communities. So this is not for the employees, but they are government entities or quasi-government entities, and they are using us for CSR during COVID for different community beneficiaries. So those examples include Mahanagar Gas, which in Maharashtra is using us to provide primary healthcare services along with COVID intervention in several areas. They include Pfizer Foundation, which has funded 2 COVID units to provide these services in Karnataka and Rajasthan, and several other examples. Along with this, we also have been shortlisted by Ziqitza, which is one of the largest ambulance providers. Again, these ambulance contracts are from the government, and they have shortlisted a platform to do patient data management and to provide telehealth consultations to those customers which they serve, like mostly government customers. So those are some examples of the type of government-related work, either direct or indirect, that we are doing during COVID. So challenges. The good news was we had more than 20 new contracts. The bad news was those contracts are B2B contracts, so they had 60 to 90-day payment cycle involved. That means we had to get short-term working capital in order to manage the short-term cash flow. And in places like India, there is very little. There are very little options for the collateral-free financing. So invoice-based financing is not as prevalent. The number of options are fairly limited. The interest rates on those are like pretty high. But we were able to address this issue partially, and this is an ongoing issue for us in the short term. Then, as I mentioned earlier, we had easy access to rapid antigen testing and rapid antibody testing, but rapid PCR, which is something which most customers demand, that is something which is only being provided by companies like Abbott to government entities and not to small enterprises like us. Then initially the cost of PPEs was pretty high. It shot up, as you guys are aware of, in the first couple of months of COVID, especially during lockdowns. Now some of those constraints have eased up, but that's exactly why we developed our own Savamore protector, exactly to address this issue. And now that issue has become less severe. Then initially the medical staff was not as readily available, or if they were available, they were not very eager to offer COVID services. I'm sure you guys can understand why. Now that constraint has also eased up a little, though still the prices of such medical staff labor are still comparatively higher as compared to the pre-COVID scenario. And lastly, vaccine distribution. So we have received a lot of customer inquiries on vaccine distribution, especially for corporate social responsibility contracts, where they want to provide vaccination to their beneficiaries. And there are obviously cold chain constraints. So the vaccines which have already been rolled out, like from Pfizer, that vaccine has a requirement of very low temperatures, which you might be aware of, 70 degrees to 90 degrees, below freezing. And the Moderna vaccine, which is probably going to be next in line, has has less of those constraints. But what we're waiting for is the AstraZeneca vaccine, and Oxford University vaccine, which has relatively modest temperature requirements, which can be easily handled via existing cold chain infrastructure available in the developing markets. So I would say what we envision is, in case of vaccine, the richer countries where the cold chain infrastructure is more developed would see more of mRNA vaccines, and the poorer countries would see more of adenovirus type of vaccines available. And those are the ones which we plan to roll out in those markets. So at this point, I'll pause and see if you have any questions.
So I think that we are almost on time, right, Lisa? So I'll just make a small question to you, addressing you too, so that you can bring a little bit more information to this audience. It relates to the fact that access to information is key for SMEs, and as we've seen in the study presented by ITC, SMEs are not particularly able to access information about incentives and even solutions to access capital. So can you please tell us a little bit more about these and what's the impact specifically in business led by women and by youth in your region? And for Shirley, I'd like you to bring some of the challenges that you are identifying, replicating your business in different geographies, and how you have dealt with this under the COVID crisis. Over to you.
So in terms of challenges in different geographies, I would say in India, we were pretty well established, and we had very easy access to government officials. So access to information was not as big an issue, and then we ran campaigns in several different areas with various funders to do prevention awareness and distribution of masks and sanitizers with those customers. So access to information in the Indian market was not as big an issue for us. Now, in other markets, for example, there was a query from our franchisee in South Africa, and where they wanted to roll out some COVID services with us. And we could not roll out those services just because the availability of the rapid tests and the access to information as to when they would be available was not as readily available. And so, and in those markets, since our tie-ins with the government officials were not like as strong as in India, so we had like no issues in replicating there. In the US, again, our main distribution channel there is from McKesson, from which we've been ordering all this stuff. And there were constraints around, first of all, some kits were available, then those kits were withdrawn. So when the kits would be available, when the PCR kits would be available and things like that is still something which is an open issue in the US market. So I would say this, the question around replication during COVID is very dependent upon the local market. And you would expect in a developed market like US that is sorted out, but it is not. But so far in India, we're pretty well established from both information as well as infrastructure perspective.
Yes, we are learning with the entrepreneurs, and particularly for BCtA in terms of looking opportunities for helping local governments to benefit from the experience coming from these enterprises that are replicating different geographies. So Barbara, over to any information related to the disaggregation of this data in terms of gender and age groups.
Well, let me highlight a few facts regarding access to information that I think are important. As Valentina showed in her presentation, and as some of our research has shown, the younger the owner of the firm, and also for women-led businesses, having access to any sort of information tends to be harder, excuse me, than for similarly sized firms that are led by older entrepreneurs or by men. And that's usually because companies that are owned by young entrepreneurs tend to be younger companies as well. So not as established and not with as many contacts within the business ecosystem as those led by more experienced owners. And in the case of women, that tends to happen because women tend to be more time constrained than men, because they usually take on additional roles, particularly during this crisis at home as well as within the business. So we do see some differences in terms of access to information. But I would like to highlight as well two issues on that point. The first one is, even when information is accessible, a lot of SMEs had a hard time identifying whether or not they actually qualified for the type of assistance that was being advertised. So understanding whether or not they qualify, it was a challenge. And the second is, if they received the information and it was clear that they qualified, they still needed assistance in applying to the kind of support that was being provided. So it's not just about receiving the information and not just about the funds that were being provided by the government, but the kind of assistance that companies need in order to understand what's available and to apply to the support that's being provided. So in our research, we found that the role of business support organizations was extremely important in closing this gap between SMEs and the support that was being provided in various countries around the world.
Perfect. So technical assistance is also strongly needed by the MSMEs for them to survive and be afloat. So I'd like to thank you very much for our panelists for your presence and for sharing your experiences with us today. I'm sure that we'll be in contact with you, and if your colleagues would like to have access to the presentations here, we'll be glad to share. And now I'm very pleased to pass over to Luca Henda, Head of Recovery Solutions and Human Mobility, to facilitate the next panel. Thank you all.
Thank you, Luciana. Thank you, Luisa. Greetings to everyone. My name is Luca Renda. For those of you who don't know me, I am the team leader within the Crisis Bureau for Recovery Solution and Human Mobility. So what my team does in New York and in the regional hubs, working very closely with other teams, is to support initiatives, especially country office initiatives to promote economic recovery, and particularly SMEs, whether they are in a crisis or post-crisis, or as in this last year, in the context of the impact of the COVID-19. And I have to say, we have forged a very, very close partnership, as I was mentioning, with other teams, and particularly with the Finance Sector Hub and the Istanbul Institute for Private Sector Development, teams headed by Marcos Neto and Saba, as well as our colleagues in the regional hub that belong to the inclusive growth. So the only way we think that this can be really addressed is by a concerted action through different teams. And at the beginning of the pandemic, we have produced a series of guidance notes and tools that we hoped could help country offices when dealing with this situation on the ground. But as it happens, and as I've seen in my many years in UNDP, country offices often are ahead of the curve, and they develop their own solutions. They through their teams, through sometimes the work and the help of the accelerator labs. And it's really fascinating, and sometimes even difficult to keep track of all the different initiatives that country offices have deployed to support economic recovery in their own countries. Today, I'll be pleased to moderate a discussion using the example from 3 country offices. We do have 45 minutes for this session, so I would ask colleagues who are presenting to keep their presentation within 10 minutes so that we have a space for question and answer. And it will be a pleasure today to listen to country cases from Ecuador, from Uganda, and from the Philippines. You will see there are 3 quite different solutions that have been deployed from our colleagues, but they have certain things in common: innovation, digitalization, using platforms. It's a little bit reconnecting to what the colleagues from ITC were mentioning at the beginning. So there have been the most successful coping mechanisms for companies, like increasing marketing efforts, selling online, developing new products, new services, linking to new supplies. So it is an application, in a sense, of those findings of the survey that were presented before. So without further ado, I would like to start by giving the floor to our colleague from UNDP Ecuador, Carla Gomez, who is Innovation and Economic Development Program Officer. Carla, I don't see you in the screen. Oh, there you are. Okay. So hi. Carla, you have been on these panels and webinars many times, showcasing the work of UNDP Ecuador. So here's one more time to share with us the very good work that you are doing. Over to you.
Thank you, Luca. Thank you, Luisa, for inviting us to present our experience about the implementation of En Marcha Digital in Ecuador. For us, it's a pleasure to be here and share with you all lessons learned during this process. I think we have been working this for the last 6-8 months, and we have achieved important results. So for that, I'm going to share the screen with you, and I'm going to do my presentation. I think I have 10 minutes to do that. Just give me one sec. Okay, so as Lucas said, in Ecuador, we have developed a specific program that is called SDG Value Chains. So this is a program that we have implemented in Ecuador after the earthquake in 2016. But when the pandemic, we have to deal with the pandemic, we have to develop some methodologies that help us to respond to the new challenges that we have in the new economy. So that's why you can see in this slide, we have developed a new methodology that is going to face the challenges in terms of digital transformation, especially focus on micro and small business. So that's why you can see here at the beginning on the year, we already have developed some methodologies, the Supply Development Program, these 2 methodologies that are focused on the rural areas, that is growing with your business and starting with your business. And in March in this year, we developed this new methodology that is called In Motion Digital, that which main objective is help micro and small business owners in order to adapt to the new conditions that COVID-19 has brought to our economy. So in order to do that, all the methodologies that we have in SDG value chain program, first what we do is we train consultants. So that's why we have some knowledge in our consultants, so they can do the implementation in a controlled way with specific deliverables under specific tools and under our main directions. Then we have create a UNDP Ecuador platform. So that's why when we deploy our implementations, we can control, we can monitoring and do the following up of our interventions on the field through a platform that we have implemented in Ecuador. And it's important for us to have the compatibility with the projects that the government is implementing in Ecuador. So now I want to present, I'm going to share at the end some results that we have during this year when we implement InMotion Digital. So as a main objective of this methodology were to promote the digital transformation of a small business in Ecuador. So that's why we developed this like 4 components, I can say. The first one is a toolkit. So in the months of March and April, we developed a toolkit that is made up of guides, videos, editable resources, and a chatbot. So you have a specific toolkit that you can use in any country office. You can use with small and micro businesses. And you have all this toolkit to share with governments, with national government, with local government, with different allies from the private sector too. Once we develop the toolkit, we continue with the second step, that was to develop alliances with the private sector. So in this case, we define some big alliances with ARCA and Pidaco, that are 2 main companies here in Ecuador, so they can allow us to distribute this material along the country. And that was very important for us because as you know, there are a lot of problems to reach the small business owners because we don't have the resources, maybe because there are restrictions. So that's why we developed some alliances with private sector, and through their sales force, we were able to develop all of our material that we prepared before. And then when there was a more controlled situation in Ecuador, we continue for the third step, that was to implement the methodology. So at the beginning, we just shared some material, but then we made some alliances with local governments, and we start training a specific governments, local governments, to implement the methodology in a more like face-to-face way. So for example, we train some local economic agencies in Quito and Guayaquil. So they, additionally to sharing the material, they really can train their own technicians and then implement the methodology with the business in their own hometowns. So first, the toolkit that I want to share with you, as I said before, was made up of guides, videos, and tools. So when we developed these 3 components of the toolkit, we were thinking in 3 specific concepts. So the first one, we wanted to adapt in the process of the small and micro businesses, because as the COVID-19 outbreak, we have to adapt the way that they process, the way that they manage their businesses. So the second thing, when we developed this toolkit, that we did was thinking of new ways to reach your customers. So even there are small steps that businesses are doing now in Ecuador. They have to introduce, for example, new methods of payments. They have to admit, for example, bank transfers, and we include this information in our guides. And third, and it was a general rule, we have to include some safety protocols in the business models in order to guarantee the health of the customers. So thinking of that, we developed these 7 guides. As you can see here, the first one, for example, how to use your WhatsApp in order to keep your business open. And here we have 7 guides, for example, how to set up a delivery process, how to use some financial advice in crisis times, how to use the safety protocols. And additionally, we developed some alliances with private sector companies in order to give information about how to use new payment methods, how to create promotion and special offers. And then we developed the last guide in order to understand how to use good practical environmental practices in your business. And now in this month, we are developed our 8th guide that is about how to promote gender equality in your business. And then we will have specific digital guides that are made of 8 guides with very practical resources for small and business owners. And here is how the guide works. So you can see we have developed this thinking in a very practical way to do it. Very simple with just the information that is needed. As you can see here, we have in this part some advices. Then in the right part, we have some actions to be taken. Then we have a flow chart, how to explain this in the business. And in the end, we have some editable resources. So we know that some people don't want to read a lot of information, so that's why we end at the last part of the guide, more information if the small business owner wants to do it or not. And additionally, we have developed some specific editable resources. So if you want, for example, to include order delivery protocol, you can do it because you have all this information in our website. And additionally, we have developed 7 videos. So additional to the guide, you can go to our website, that is this, ODS Cadenas de Valor en Marcha Digital, and you can have 1 video about how to implement the guide with very practical examples. So we have taken different business, for example, restaurant, and how she implement all these actions that we have defined in the guide. We put it in a practical video so it can be very friendly and intuitive content. And all this information you can share, you can find, and then you can share in our website that is called ODS Cadenas de Valor en Marcha Digital. And you can download all the material that you want. And then, as I said before, in the second part of this program, we start working with some local governments, with some private sector companies, in order to do the second part of this program. Not just the material, but additionally the second step was to develop a methodology, very like agile methodology that help us to help business owners to open their business again. So that's why we developed this methodology that is made up of 3 phases. First, we do our online training, then we do our remote technical assistant, and then at the end we do following up and monitoring. So we have defined a timeline, as you can see, that lasts 8 weeks. So for example, at the beginning of the first 2 weeks, we conducted a diagnosis to understand what is going on with the business and which are the main areas that this business may need help. Then we define some virtual trainings here when you can see these icons. And then we have some specific technical assistance that can be made online or face-to-face, depending on the context of each city. And then we have closure stage when we define the main steps that we have achieved and the steps that need to be worked in the future. And additionally here, as you can see in the week 3 and 8 and 7, we invite some private sector companies in order to explain about how to use, for example, new methods of payments. And how we do that? So as you know, UNDP has to work in alliances in order to find resources, in order to find some technicians that help us to do this process. So that's why we we carry out through 3 virtual training sessions to the technicians of the local governments. So we train local governments, we train their teams in 3 sessions. So we explain how to do this methodology that you see here. So they were able to do the implementation direct with their beneficiaries. So that's why what we can achieve during these like 8 months. We have been working in 11 provinces of Ecuador. In 11 provinces. We have partnered with 35 alliances. In total, we have created 35 alliances. We have trained 180 technicians of local governments. With the help of the private sector, we have delivered seed capital to more than 300 businesses. And additionally, with the help of the private sector, we have delivered material, printed material to more than 40,000 businesses. And additionally, in terms of digital material, we have been for more than 100,000 businesses. And I think this has been a success for us because we have a very wide scope, because we have the help of different actors from the private to the sector actors. And final, thanks to the support of the regional with Sara and Rita, additionally, we have been able to transfer all the material that we have developed in Ecuador and through the regional to different countries. So now, if you can see in this last part of my slide, countries like Guatemala, Colombia, Barbados, Venezuela, and República Dominicana already adopted the Emotion digital guides, so they are implementing in their territories too. So this is the experience of Ecuador. We have been working in this year, and the next year in 2021, we will do we will implement the methodology in more provinces and with more business owners. Thank you, Luca.
Thank you very much, Carla. An excellent presentation, excellent results for the program. Congratulations. Just for the colleagues that are listening, and March, or as it's called now, In Motion, has now really become a UNDP corporate tool. So any country office that is interested in replicating this, please contact us. We will work with the country office in Ecuador to translate and in any language that is necessary, and also help you customize the tool. As you know, it has happened already in other country offices, at least in Latin America and the Caribbean. Okay, so we are now going to the next presentation. We are going to Uganda, UNDP Uganda, and I will give the floor to Innocent Fred Ejolu, who is Partnerships, Innovations and Development Solutions Specialist. Innocent, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Second, yes, thank you very much, Luca, and very warm greetings, friends. The presentation we are sharing is also the story from the Ugandan perspective on some of our experiences in also responding to this pandemic, the socioeconomic impacts of COVID-19 here in Uganda. So we'll share mainly, we're asked to share on challenges, the solution, the result, what we've learned, and the perspectives in terms of the future, and how we perhaps structure UNDP support. So the impact of COVID has been very big here in Uganda. 60% of our informal MSMEs are at the risk of going out of business. Over 46% of workers have been pushed below the poverty line, again in the informal sector, hospitality industry and trading and services. Women and the youth most affected. Already 1.9 million have fallen or slipped into poverty only in the first 8 months of the lockdown. That was May to June. And we fear poverty may go up 2 to 8% with a slowdown on progress on important SDGs 1, 8, and 10. The tourism sector, which was doing very well, the top earner of Forex was severely hit, and this is about to lose $5 billion over the next 5 years. Now, these are results from a very in-depth studies on the socioeconomic impacts of COVID-19. It was a UN study that UNDP led, but most of the agencies were involved in this, and it is informing most of what we are doing. Now, in terms of UNDP's COVID-19 offer, we have two tracks, but I'll focus on the first track, which is looking at the socioeconomic impacts especially, and the support to accelerate recovery, capitalizing on digital solutions mainly, but also looking at innovative financing in the context of MSMEs. So we've had the private sector, and we've worked on a financing facility for young entrepreneurs, looking at the growth sectors, 7 of them. Then we have also looking at supply chains and keeping these active. Again, looking at e-commerce and what it can do. Now, the first one is a partnership between UNDP and Jumia Uganda. It's an e-commerce platform for micro, small, and medium enterprises. The first time we are taking the informal sector in a big way online to connect these informal market vendors with consumers. And we are capitalizing on Jumia, which is the leading e-commerce platform in Africa. We aim to harness these digital solutions and impact the vulnerable women, youth, and farmers, sustain our supply chains, recover livelihoods, also see if we can position our MSMEs to quickly pivot and rethink their online strategies, help them also to repurpose their assets and resources, and take advantage of the technological dividends that we see as we harness the digital economy. So that's what we are working on. The challenge is essentially a big one. How do you help this 80%? The informal sector is 80% in this country. Okay, more than 90 are young people. It's very fragile to shocks, and women and youth are being battered most within this framework, with more than 40% of the workers falling into poverty. This is the risk that we face. So our solution was a simple solution. Take these informal vendors online. So connect them through a leading online platform. And we targeted 7 informal markets in Kampala, initially 5, but 2 requested to join this whole crusade, and they therefore voluntarily came on board, and which was very good for us. These are major outlets for agricultural produce in the country because they serve a very big chunk of the middle class population. But of course, we also try to tackle the issue of the gap in terms of digital literacy and introduce what we call market agents, who are basically people who are smarter than the average person with using the phone, the mobile phone, that would facilitate the connection between the vendor and the consumer. And those have helped us a lot as we get the vendors to appreciate the value of the smartphone and how it can be a tool to get them to consumers. So that's what we have done. Of course, this is a 12-month initiative. We struck it in May 2020, and it's running up to 2021. Already we are seeing prospects to prolong this, to give us more. Basically, we are giving very little in terms of digitalization support, but leveraging strategic partnerships from government, private sector, civil society, and of course, positioning UNDP as a knowledge broker, to drive this conversation about private sector development, MSMEs, e-commerce, etc., as we talk about financing as well. Now, Jumia Food, very big brand with the tested systems and experience as well in terms of training and managing a network of riders who deliver these safe and contactless deliveries to customers around the greater Kampala metropolis, but also from a business development perspective. They can also help, shifts in terms of business behavior by the MSMEs we are working with, but also the different players in that whole value chain and logistics system. We are seeing very good results earlier on. Already 1,500 vendors are connected and selling online in all the 7 markets. We are reaching over 3,000. These are both direct and indirect in terms of getting to the customer. And most of these are women and youth. And what's interesting, the average daily vendor turnover has more than doubled, from an average of $10 to over $22. That's the average. There are some who do very well, others struggle, but on average, in all these 7 markets spread across the city, this is what we've seen. And this is in just the experimental phase of 5 months. So we are seeing very, very, very bright prospects as the lessons are beginning to emerge. A very huge potential for online platforms, certainly, and the evidence that was provided in the first presentation showed. Growth in sales for vendors has more than doubled, which has been a very good lesson and an opportunity for increased access for microfinancing. We can also capitalize on the big data through the records on transaction to, show the credit worthiness of some of these MSMEs and access them credit. We've also seen new realities where there is expanded demand, which is putting pressure on the capital base for the MSME. So there's a huge opportunity for financing that targets the transactional need for money, the money you need on a day-to-day basis for a small business, the micro and nano finance. This is an area which is not very well developed, but there is a huge opportunity. We are beginning to see standardization. We can now talk about it. And the Ministry of Trade and Industry is coming in to see if we can barcode and trace goods back to their origin, etc. We still have challenges with the knowledge gap in terms of illiteracy, in terms of tech, but also we are seeing mobile money being deepened as an option. In fact, we are thinking of a partnership with ABSA in terms of bringing internet banking more into the picture and create wallets that give a range of options in terms of payment, solutions. What's also interesting, lots of partnerships, lots of opportunities to go regional. Nigeria has shown a lot of interest. They are working on this. Ivory Coast, Ghana, Niger is working on something similar. Namibia launched Tambula, which is very much similar. So there are lots of opportunities. We are also doing some work with, Bangladesh through the SDG Impact Accelerator, which is linked. There's a lot to pick as well from Bangladesh and enrich this experience. Government policy as well on e-commerce is going to shift based on real experience. These are all opportunities that we are beginning to see. And in terms of the future, we can replicate this within the country. We can expand the model to support also agro produce and also support the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. We can also aggregate smaller online vendors who are selling hair extension, who are selling food, who are selling all sorts of things on Facebook and what have you. How can we aggregate this as well and work with established platforms in a way that is meaningful and that reaches them a wider range, of consumers out there. We're also looking at supporting commodity-based platforms that we can do a lot with in terms of reaching the market and reaching other services. So we are looking at that as well as the ecosystem approach in terms of how we connect different services, support MSME. So that's what we are doing. Secondly, and briefly, we have the second initiative on Youth for Business, Innovation and Entrepreneurship Facility. Again, a partnership between UNDP and Stanbic Bank with the Private Sector Foundation of Uganda. And again, tackling the unemployment challenge. Over 78% of Ugandans are very young. And we are looking at how to tackle the issue of limited access to startup or scale up capital, and how we can leverage partnership with the private sector, with government, with development partners to stimulate transformative growth in accessing affordable financing for innovative and commercially viable businesses, with a strong focus on the issue of jobs for the young people. The president has launched this initiative only in August. It's an innovative instrument which is promoting impact-driven entrepreneurship, fostering innovation, and leveraging business solutions as we try to tackle the youth unemployment. We aim essentially to create 2,000 new decent jobs for young people and also retool and skill 50,000 young people. That is what we are looking at. Already the resources that we are focusing on is about $10 million in grant resources and 200 million in concessional loans. So we have a range of targets that we are looking at in terms of results. But what you need to note here is that three components which are important in this initiative: Innovation Challenge Fund and Growth Accelerator, Enterprise Challenge Fund, and then the Youth Entrepreneurship and Innovation Ecosystem Platform, as we target these growth areas: agriculture, tourism, mining, etc. And already we have good results. We've been able to give out grants through very competitive processes to a number of businesses. And if you like, you will see here that most of these are IT-linked startups, but also you have agriculture. We also have in the creatives, and there are results we are beginning to see in terms of what we can achieve through these youth SMEs. So lots of opportunities in terms of results there. But looking forward, going forward, we want to activate the innovation. The Innovation Challenge Fund is already active. We've done 2 rounds, which have attracted 570 proposals. We've sifted through that and got 21 very good proposals that have been granted. The Enterprise Challenge Fund is being activated in the first quarter next year with a focus on agriculture, processing, and value addition, and how we access the regional markets. And we would like to co-design with FAO. And of course, we are also looking at the Youth for Business Ecosystem platform. And we have an ideathon coming in Feb to identify startups. So from the 570, we don't lose those ideas. Some can again be looked at as potential ideas for startups, and then we work with them to incubate those ideas. So that's what is cooking, and already we are looking at partnerships beyond Stanbic UNDP to other banks. ABSA has shown a lot of interest in that regard. We have lots of potential to replicate this regionally in those countries with the flags up there. UNDP Namibia already launched the SDG Impact Facility on the 2nd November. So these are the stories that we have in terms of what we are trying to do around the issue of resilience and competitiveness of our SMEs in the context of recovering and going beyond this recovery of COVID-19. So I'd like to stop there, and I thank you very much. I have colleagues online who will be chipping in. Stefan, Deborah, Wilson, they are available to answer some of your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Innocent, and excellent initiative. You were very, in order to maybe stay within the 10 minutes, you went very fast in your presentation. So I'm, in any case, the slides will be available. But before we go to the next country office, I wanted to maybe ask you to spend a minute or two in terms of if a country office is interested in replicating this. I mean, what are the conditions that are required for this program to work? And what kind of tools or platform that are existing that you have developed can be replicated? Just quickly, but I think it's important for other colleagues that are listening to understand to what extent, what they need to prepare, how they need to prepare the ground, and what can be kind of easily customized. Over to you.
Great, thank you very much. I was trying to work within the time, but I think what's very crucial is to have a very clear understanding of the impact in terms of how COVID has affected these different targets that we are looking at. The other, of course, is to manage the process of finding the right types of partnership who are going to give you speed from the start. What has helped us is we have accelerated from the word go because we've forged the right type of partnership. And these partnerships should also be partnerships that see the bigger picture. So when we are engaging with these partners, it's not so much what is in for the partner, it's more about the development benefit and how that development benefit makes business sense for the medium to long term. So the engagement with the partners are very, very important so that it's not a quick fix as much as we want acceleration. So that's the second issue. The other, of course, is to have some quick loops that help you to refine the concepts, to refine the tools that we are looking at. Then you will also need flexibility in terms of how the administrative aspects within our UNDP system facilitate the process. We used resources from the Rapid Response Facility, and that helped us, for instance, on Jumia, because we are very creative. You also need to think about how to deploy your capacities within the accelerator labs and how to use that whole network, because it's available to critique, give you reflections, point you at countries that are doing something maybe similar, and then you generate that momentum. It's also very crucial to share, and keep sharing, because the feedback has helped us to sharpen what we've been doing down the road. Then, of course, you need expertise as well on some of the technical aspects. Like we had to get someone on private sector development to help us think business. That is Stefan, who is very much on the call here. So that also is very, very important. So just to highlight a few, but we can always continue the conversation.
Great, thank you so much. You see the email. Colleagues, if you want to know more about the program, definitely get in touch with Innocent and his team and inquire about how this transfer of knowledge and possible replication can happen. We have just about over 10 minutes for the last presentation. So we go to now the Philippines. Our colleague Maria Luisa Lim Jolong Bayan, who is the team leader, Institutions and Partnership Program. Maria Luisa, over to you. You have about 10 minutes and then we can do the wrap up. There are questions in the, if you have questions, please put them in the chat and we try to answer to the extent possible if we have time. Otherwise, they will be asked in writing later on. Go ahead, Maria Luisa.
Thank you, Luca. Pleasure to be here tonight. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone. Indeed, there are interconnections in the different presentations. Thank you for highlighting that, Luca. And I will be presenting initiatives of the Philippines Country Office, which are more or less similar to the other country offices initiatives, not in the same, extensiveness, but very similar in intention and in approaches. Aside from our programmatic response, I will briefly share with you what we found out from the MSME survey that we have undertaken in 2 waves. MSMEs comprise 99.5% of business establishments in the Philippines and employ about 63% of the country's workforce. Its contribution to growth is immense, and its role in the country's recovery is very crucial, I guess, to say the least. Next slide, please. I will be presenting 3 initiatives of the country office, and the first one is Empower PH. It is enhanced manufacturing of protective wear and equipment for COVID-19 response in the Philippines. Empower PH was designed to provide a solution to increase demand for medical use and non-medical use protective wear through local production and sourcing. We highlight here local production. A number of development partners at the height of COVID were looking for local producers in order to help the country, but found that there were no producers of medical use PPEs. It was only about 4 months later that a confederation of protective wear manufacturers came to force, and these large companies shifted a certain percentage of their businesses, some were electronics producers, to start producing local PPEs. But how do we deal with the smaller ones, the MSMEs? The platform addresses the need to ensure quality and safety of protective wear by offering a basic vetting mechanisms that local manufacturers can access to evaluate their products on their own, but according to standards and minimum requirements of government for non-medical use PPEs and community face coverings or face masks, and validating certifications of medical use manufacturers before they are allowed to feature their products online. The standards are in the form of technical packages and specifications that are now available in the website. Empower PH also provides a collaborative platform that enables linkages and learning among various stakeholders. It facilitates integration across the local supply chain of protective wear production and accelerates manufacturing and distribution by connecting suppliers of raw materials with local manufacturers and prospective consumers. It offers access to all types of companies, large manufacturers, medium, small, and micro enterprises, as well as social enterprises and community-based sewing groups who wish to repurpose their operations towards PPEs and community masks. With these, Empower PH presents a consolidation point of various portals for different stakeholders in the protective wear manufacturing value chain. When we asked the Department of Trade and Industry, our champion for this platform, what makes them excited about this platform, given that ADB has already launched its supply chain platform, the response of DTI, the Department of Trade and Industry, was that ADB's platform does not provide the information that Empower PH has. And that is over and beyond what ADB is offering. So basically, what we have in the platform is that the manufacturer portal is for factories, enterprises, groups, or individuals that produce or intend to produce protective wear for medical and non-medical use. The supplier portal enables producers, distributors, and retailers of medical and non-medical fabrics and accessories to connect with manufacturers who will need their products. The consumer portal is for any individual, enterprise, organization, or institution that plans to purchase PPEs, community face coverings for medical and non-medical use. Apart from these, the platform also showcases a beneficiary portal that will present an inventory and availability of various types of medical products across hospitals and medical institutions based on the data published by the Department of Health. Moreover, it offers a centralized information hub to democratize the manufacturing process and to educate consumers on how to best evaluate quality of protective wear products available in the market. This is by giving them, making available videos of do-it-yourself testing of different products. All these were developed using existing local references from the Department of Health, the Bureau of Philippine Standards, as well as documents from the World Health Organization. Across these portals, registered users can access the Resource Center for free and can download various references on manufacturing best practices, PPE usage rationalization, quality standards and guidelines, instructional videos, and open source technical design packs. What's next for Empower PH? We have discussed with the Department of Trade and Industry that equipment and COVID-19 tests will be set up in the platform as well, and look into shifting the platform into a full e-commerce platform. The Philippines Disaster Resilience Foundation, the largest network of private sector companies and foundations working on disaster preparedness and recovery, has tapped the platform for its PPE requirements post-typhoon. And lastly, following discussions with the regional government, we are also replicating this platform in the new Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao. The website is here, you can see it, and you can visit the site. The next program offering is Synergizing Recovery Initiatives, Knowledge and Adaptation Practices for MSMEs, and we call this CCAP. CCAP was a product of a call for proposals from Connecting Business Initiative, which engages the private sector strategically before, during, and after emergencies. Together with the UN OCHA and the Philippines Disaster Resilience Foundation, we are implementing CCAP project, which aims to harness private sector resources and technical expertise among its network and partner organizations to design and implement programmatic interventions suited for recovery and strategic foresight planning for businesses. The CCAP project also conducts online awareness sessions and mentoring on business continuity planning, business recovery, and other technical assistance for MSMEs. It also provides the resources and guidelines provided by government with respect to operations of businesses during the general community quarantine. CCAP is basically an online COVID-19 recovery hub that equips micro, small, and medium businesses in the Philippines with the right information and knowledge on how they can adapt and redesign their operations in light of COVID-19 pandemic across the globe. We have mapped industry and institutional actors. We have collected data from MSMEs, the impact of COVID-19 on MSMEs, and analyzed them. We did a comparative analysis of MSME practices and developed an online dashboard to present best practices, best and good practices for business recovery, business continuity planning. And then we are now validating these practices through a recovery and strategic foresight planning session with companies. Later on, we plan to evaluate and further disseminate these resources. So basically on UNDP's end, we are developing a recovery and strategic foresight toolkit for MSMEs, which is grounded on local culture. We are also developing a policy brief for MSMEs, working on our MSME surveys and working with other UN agencies. With the recent devastating typhoons that the country experienced, the sub has been tested to be useful for post-natural disaster recovery as well. So this is, again, CCAP, and the website is also here. The third and last initiative that I will be presenting is the Innovation for Social Impact Partnership Project, which during the COVID period presented an innovative solutions grant facility. With Australian contribution, we started Innovation for Social Impact in 2018 to support startups with tailored and dedicated support in all aspects of business, and then match them with their needed financing. The support includes impact measurement and management, which is provided in partnership with Business Call to Action. The Social Impact as an accelerator of the ISIP project has developed a program to help social enterprise beneficiaries affected by COVID-19. We have found out that majority of enterprises, particularly social enterprises, which are based which started as small and community-based projects, have been looking for recovery financing and access to resources that can help them stay afloat. The Innovative Solutions Grant Facility was a response of the project to support innovative and creative solutions that our supported social enterprises will carry out through two kinds of innovations: product innovation, by developing a new product to address or mitigate the effects of COVID-19 pandemic, or which may also be an improvement of current products' performance or features adapted to be of use in response to the crisis. It can also be a process innovation, which implements a new or improved production and or delivery method, including, for example, agricultural transport solutions, in an effort to significantly increase their production levels and reduce costs brought about by the effects of the pandemic, including the community quarantine that has been ongoing since March. In addition, the process innovation can be through the development of new revenue streams or distribution channels, provided that the innovation does not compromise the social enterprise's social impact embedded in the value chain. Some of our examples, those that receive these competitive grants, is FAME. FAME, originally, when we supported them in 2018, was an enterprise that produces maritime transponders. During COVID-19, with its members who are scientists or just plain curious and creative members, came up with a respiratory utility with actuator help. Basically, a ventilator that is ambulatory. It has a smart mobile portable AmbuBag resuscitator that can be used in emergency cases to assist patients in breathing. Through the device, FAME aims to help hospitals, particularly in areas with a large and increasing number of COVID cases, by giving more response capacity. Right now, the device is undergoing the final stages of testing by our Department of Science and Technology. Another enterprise is Bambuhay, who used to produce bamboo straws and has been supplying hotels and other corporate clients of these bamboo straws. They added a new product line during the pandemic, which is bamboo face shields, combining bamboo as the frame of the face shield and an acrylic panel for the shield itself. They are also now experimenting on activated bamboo charcoal as a disinfectant. So all these are, creative responses during a crisis. So what about the results of our MSME survey?
In 1 minute, Maria Luisa, if you can, in 1 minute.
All right.
Thank you.
We were implementing these projects alongside our MSME study, which included 2 waves of surveys: social media listening and sentiment analysis. We asked questions about how the different aspects of businesses are during the COVID pandemic. And the chart shows, operating capacities, employment, and income changes as, the severely affected aspects. Next slide, please. We also asked them on, we tried to probe deeper on what the MSME's impacts and challenges were, both on supply and demand sides. And we found out that, of course, low demand because of the, prolonged quarantine was the central concern of MSMEs. On the supply side, logistics, closures, access to government guidelines, shortage of raw material, and reduced manpower were the top 5 challenges reported to be faced by businesses. Through the survey results and corresponding analysis, UNDP is now sharing insights that aim to support the development of a comprehensive recovery plan for MSMEs by the government, private sector, and of development partners. Our programmatic offer and the survey were done almost at the same time, with the survey validating that our programmatic response were necessary actions. And what were our key takeaways? Number 1 is, of course, working together, including forging uncommon partnerships during crisis situations. Number 2, looking into the future, identifying what could be the possible needs, what issues may yet arise, identifying and managing risks, which prepares businesses for the unknown. And lastly, whether in normal and especially in crisis situations, agility, flexibility, mobility, and digitalization are factors that ensure business continuity and resilience. Data, transparency, and access to information, which all the other presenters also presented, are key ingredients of business continuity and resilience. Thank you very much, Luca, and I look forward to some discussions.
Thank you so much, Maria Luisa. Very good presentation as well. Congratulations. Again, so we've seen examples from 3 country offices covering a range of initiatives, but a lot of them in common, but each one customized to the context, but at the same time rigorously designed based on data, with strong partnership with private and public sector, and also with a strong eye to impact and really demonstrating impact. At this point, I'm not sure what we should do. We have very little time, and there are no questions in the chat. However, please do send us our written question if you have them, and we will try to answer with copying to the entire group. There is no question that we need to do more of these webinars to share the fantastic work that our colleagues in the country office are doing. Maybe do a little collection during 2021 of all the experiences, because it's so rich and it's so powerful to hear them. Guys, we have not much time, so I will actually now give the floor to Saba for the concluding remarks. And thank you.
Thank you very much, Luca. I just want to thank everyone who has presented, the country offices, ITC, Shelley. I think fundamentally what we see is in March, when the International Chamber of Commerce put out this call, and we have the ICC here as an observer, Daphne, welcome, put a call to save the SMEs. This was the call. We have millions and millions of SMEs that have been affected, as we saw from the ITC surveys, by this impact. You have all kinds of different organizations who have come through a call to action. You know, in this context, you see examples from the UNDP partners. We also at the corporate level establish a working group working on MSMEs and various interventions. In that context, three important things is we have other sort of offers. We have Artak here, for example, from Bangkok, who's working on venture accelerator, much more advanced growth SMEs, and they just launched a medtech in Singapore. So we will highlight those kinds of other types of intervention. Second important point is it is important to understand who we're dealing with. The informal enterprise, the woman-owned businesses, you know, sort of local value chain sort of SMEs and their challenges versus, let's say, SMEs in global value chains. And I think that finally, two additional observation is that how we do it, it was very clear that you need a coalition of actors to work together. We have very good examples from the country level here. There's one that we're unable to join today was Ethiopia. They have done a fantastic work around PPE production with local players and building a coalition. And at a global level at UNDP, we just launched something called the Global Private Sector COVID-19 Facility with the International Chamber of Commerce, UN Global Compact, and also Pricewaterhouse, Microsoft, and DHL, and putting this issue of SME resilience, digital resilience, financial resilience, and integration at the heart is something we're working on. So we look forward to, with all of you, as part of this series of further conversation. And thank you, Luisa, for organizing this event.
No, thank you, everyone. Thank you, colleagues, all that has participated in this call. I hope you find this interest and you would like to learn more. And don't hesitate to contact colleagues to learn more about the programs. And as Luca mentioned, we're going to share all the presentations and stay tuned for further events, I think, because there is a great demand for learning across what we are all doing to support the SMEs. Thank you all for joining. Have a great day or evening or afternoon. Bye.